On April 26, 1986 at 1 hour 23 minutes the largest nuclear catastrophe in the history of the last century occurred. The fourth power unit of the Chernobyl filling station exploded. To this day this event is shrouded in mysteries and legends. Escape of animals. Officially, the Chernobyl disaster was presented to the world as negligence of Soviet nuclear workers. They allegedly, through negligence, made some mistakes. The emergency protection did not work, the reactor overheated and exploded. The directors, chief engineers, reactor shop managers, and other minor executives were all named as guilty people. Many of them were put behind bars, and the case materials were classified. Only in time, when the people involved in the events of those days were set free and government officials simply died, new details of the accident began to appear in various sources. The most interesting thing in the unfolding circumstances is not that the authorities concealed the true number of victims, they silenced the agony in which the soldiers, thrown to eliminate the consequences, who were working without any protective equipment at all, died, and some officials from the management of the Chernobyl NPP paid bribes to buy their way out of prison. The mystical details of the Chernobyl events are interesting. For example, such a fact, at the time of the accident, there were practically no pets left within a few tens of kilometers of the hotbed. As early as the beginning of 1986, residents of Chernobyl, Pripyat and other settlements in the vicinity began to notice that their pets were behaving restlessly. Calm domestic cats all of a sudden went wild, could start rushing around the apartment, screaming, throwing themselves at the feet of their owners. Dogs that were taken for walks would try to escape, and many would chew their leashes and run away. Even the birds behaved strangely. The parrots could bang their heads against the wall. In February '86, the newspaper Molod Ukraini published a short article about a strange epidemic in the town of Pripyat. It was about unusual animal behavior which was explained by a mass disease and recommended all pet owners to consult veterinarians. At the same time, as noted by witnesses, poles in the cities were hung ads for missing dogs and cats. There are reports that more than 1,000 animals have run away from homes. What is this, if not the foreboding of misfortune for which our little brethren are famous? The portal to hell. Lydia Arkhangelskaya, a representative of the Moscow branch of the Chernobyl Union, an organization that unites liquidators from all over the CIS, and in those years, a participant in the events at Chernobyl, recalls that she has never seen a single representative of fauna during all her work at the disaster site. There were no living or dead bodies. Not even crows were circling, says Lydia. Of course, it was terrifying. We had no fear at all, though. For us, young people, the trip to Chernobyl was an adventure. We did not realize that the health could be harmed. We generally did not know what the radiation. We became familiar with it and its consequences only years later. But back then, I remember that in the evenings we went to bed in 8 local rooms, and before going to sleep we were speculating about what had really happened at the nuclear power plant. Somehow no one believed that our scientists had done anything wrong. There were different versions, sometimes the most unbelievable. For example, they said that the scientists had opened a door to hell, and that evil appeared on Earth from the underworld. Some locals said that the day after the disaster they saw the face of devil in the sky, looking down and laughing. Many local people talked to liquidators from all over the Soviet Union about strange objects in the sky, looking like flying saucers. For example, famous Soviet ufologist Vladimir Azaza was once convinced that aliens did not do without aliens in Chernobyl. The only thing they did there, whether they caused the catastrophe or, conversely, helped prevent it, he never found out. In one of his last interviews, he died in 2009, Azaza said, "I personally interviewed over 100 people who had seen UFOs both on the eve of what happened in Chernobyl, on the night of the disaster, and even weeks later. I can assure you, they were telling the truth, because people who didn't know each other, who lived in different cities dozens of kilometers away from each other, described absolutely identical alien ships." A total of 4 types of unidentified flying objects were observed in the Chernobyl zone. These are the traditional disc-shaped saucers with a dome on top, cigars, glowing and constantly changing color balls and triangles. What their mission is the mystery of my life. But I want to believe that an alien intelligence did come to our rescue. Independently of Azaza, his investigation of UFO participation in the Chernobyl incident was conducted by another ufologist, a famous Ukrainian scientist from Gostomel, Valery Kradikvil, who collected and analyzed witnesses' testimonies in his book UFOs: Time Machine. Kradikvil managed to find the man who was awakened during that tragic night, Mikhail Veritsky, senior radiation surveyor of UDC, Department of Radiation Monitoring, of Chernobyl, working and living there since the very beginning of Chernobyl NPP construction. He told the ufologist that on the night of the accident he left with a group of radiation surveyors on an emergency call to the 4th power unit. On the way up, having seen the reactor of the blown-out unit ablaze and having felt the burning face, the specialists, understanding the threat of radiation exposure, decided to abandon the immediate task and return to the base for protective equipment. But as soon as they started to turn around their GAZ-51 vehicle, they saw a bright brass-colored ball of fire slowly floating in the sky. It was 6 to 8 meters in diameter and hovered about 300 meters from the reactor of the 4th unit. It lasted about 3 minutes. The ball suddenly turned pale, became barely visible, and slowly drifted away to the northwest, in the direction of Belarus. The most interesting thing is that when we turned the instruments showed radiation of 3000 milliroentgen/hour, but after the UFO flyby it was 800 milliroentgen/hour. It is impossible to explain it scientifically. But the real boom of UFOs happened after 1986, both over Chernobyl and over the territories which were contaminated with radiation, the adjacent areas of Belarus, Bryansk region, and of course Kiev. According to the report documents of the Commission on Anomalous Phenomena at the Ukrainian branch of the Radio Electronics and Communications Scientific and Technical Association named after A.S. Popov. I.S. Popov of 1990, within 4 years after the incident, were recorded over 8,000 observations of UFOs. Most of all over the Pripyat River, over Raduga Lake, within Kiev, near Bila Tserkva, villages Yablanovka and Brodianka, and over Golisivsky Forest. A message from Tesla. Another curious fact about Chernobyl does not give peace to mystics for many years. The thing is that exactly 25 minutes before the explosion, when nothing happened yet, seismic stations scattered around the globe recorded a powerful seismic wave. To date, there are recordings of dozens of instruments installed, for example, in Germany, in Israel, and even in Canada, which reported the event before it began. Of course, one can pick up again the rumor of a message from hell, something burst out of the bowels of the earth, so it shook it up quite a bit. But another version seems much more sensible. Thus, according to one of the researchers of the incident, scientist Pyotr Wojciechowski, the explosion is the result of the Americans testing a secret weapon. The explosion does not come from Satan, but from Nikola Tesla, Wojciechowski speculated. He conducted experiments on transmitting shock force over a distance. Perhaps one of his followers repeated the experiment. And why did they choose a nuclear power plant for it? Well, it's always more interesting and resonant than just making a clap in the taiga. Besides, it is unlikely that radiation would have reached the USA, and the fact that it would have covered half of Europe, the way it is, so be it. By the way, economists say that the only country which benefited from the Chernobyl disaster was America. After the explosion, the construction of hundreds of nuclear power plants was mothballed all over Europe. In Germany alone, 14 construction sites were shut down. All of Europe, which began to give up nuclear power plants, began to switch to oil, which soared in price. In 1 year after the catastrophe, the US budget increased by $37 billion. So, maybe it was a planned diversion? An undeclared war using secret weapons? This is destiny. As you know, all significant events in history have always been predicted by someone. And we are not talking about homegrown psychics and clairvoyants. Historians, esotericists, and scientists unanimously state that the events of Chernobyl were described even in the Bible, which means it is impossible to avoid them and nobody is to blame but the fate itself. A fragment in the Revelation of St. John the Evangelist is considered prophetic. And a great star fell from heaven, burning like a torch, and it fell on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of the waters. And the third part of the waters became wormwood, and many of the people died of the waters, because they became bitter. The fact is that wormwood in Ukrainian is exactly what Chernobyl means. Of course, the great Nostradamus couldn't help saying about the coming catastrophe. The face of Sphinx will be revealed on the Red Planet, which caused many misfortunes for the nations. In 13 years the comet will arrive, and 5 new disasters will take people away. The face of the Sphinx was discovered by the American Viking spacecraft on the surface of Mars in 1973, and 13 years later, in 1986, Halley's Comet approached the Earth. 2 weeks after the maximum approach to the Earth, there was an accident at Unit 4 of the nuclear power plant in Chernobyl. Apparently, this was one of the 5 new disasters that Nostradamus predicted would kill people. However, the most amazing prophecy is Andrei Tarkovsky's film Stalker, based on a script by the Strugatsky brothers. One of the reasons for the emergence of the zone according to the script is the accident in the 4th bunker. And this is 6 years before the real explosion in the 4th unit of the nuclear reactor and the emergence of a 30-kilometer exclusion zone. There is another legend about Chernobyl, related to the movie. According to some workers at the plant, a few days before the accident, they saw a man with giant wings in the sky. It is as if he was observed over the flames of the fire that broke out after the explosion. Influenced by these stories, director Mark Pellington made a film called The Mothman. According to the film, the Mothman warns people of impending disasters. The film's credits state that it is based on real events, based on the accounts of eyewitnesses who survived Chernobyl. Subscribe to the channel and share this video with your friends. Give it a thumbs up. Tell us interesting facts you know about the topic of this video. See you in new videos.